Well, hello, this is George Garrels of the University of Arizona. I'm the director of the Arizona Laserchron Center, and we wanted to put this video together to tell you a little bit about how our lab has operated during this COVID crisis of 2020. So as you may know, our lab has operated for a long time now with a pretty continuous flow of visitors coming through the lab, visiting faculty members, postdocs, research scientists, undergraduate students, even K through 12 students would come to our lab. They would bring samples and images, or we would prepare them here. And while they were here during their visit, they would generate the data operating the mass spectrometers and lasers. We would help them interpret the data. They would learn a little bit about the theory and methodology of uranium-lead geochronology through training sessions. And then by the time that they were finished with their visit, after just a few days, they would have a data set which was pretty much ready to publish. As you can imagine, this mode of operation has just not been possible since COVID came on in about March of 2020. So the first thing that happened was our governor issued a stay-at-home order for the state of Arizona. And at about the same time, in the middle of March, the University of Arizona sent students home and told labs to pretty much stop operating except on essential research projects. And they provided the opportunity for laboratories to submit a request, a waiver, to be able to continue operating on high priority samples so long as particular safety protocols were followed. So we put together such a waiver request. We described that we wanted to continue operating on samples for students who wanted to continue progress toward degree, wanting to finish undergraduate or graduate degrees, for faculty researchers who had NSF projects that were ending sometime soon, and also for researchers to be able to come to our lab or send samples to our lab and generate pilot data for a project that they wanted to submit in a proposal in the future. So this waiver request was approved by the University of Arizona. The procedures that we described in that waiver request were that we would only have one person in each lab at one time. People would be wearing masks. Whenever they're in community spaces and open spaces, they would observe distancing. Whenever people would come into a lab, they would wipe down all the common surfaces with alcohol or a cleaning solution, doorknobs, keyboards, adjustments on the instruments. Anything that people would touch would get a thorough cleaning when you enter the lab and when you leave the lab. We also put into place a calendar where we could keep track of who was going to be in each lab on each day. We wanted to have only one person per lab, and so with this calendar we could schedule who was going to be in which lab during which day. We would know exactly what that person was doing in that lab, and we would be able to check on them at the end of the day that everything went okay. So with those safety protocols in place and the waiver in place, we operated through the summer. This would have been May, June, July, with very few visitors coming to the lab. Only a few people came to the lab, but we were very busy with remote sessions with our collaborating researchers. We worked hard early in the summer to come up with different methods to have virtual remote interactions with our researchers. And the intent was that this would take the place of the education and training, the experience they would have when they were here in the lab. So in the next few segments, you'll see some of our researchers kind of describing the methods that we've developed with Zoom and with TeamViewer that enabled researchers to continue generating the data they need for their projects, and also to accomplish many of the things that they would be able to do if they had been able to come to the lab.
So we're currently running spots that a user has picked on our laser, and while those are running, he's choosing another set of spots for his next sample. The biggest issue that we've been having is just getting users to download the software and to get Chromium on their computer. So Chromium only runs on PC, so it's a bit problematic for our Mac users. But we've been figuring out ways around that and trying to get a little more creative in how we're doing it. So right now we're doing TeamViewer picking, which allows people who have Macs to pick remotely. But a lot of the users are liking it a lot, and they've actually asked that if they come to the lab in the future, whether we could provide mosaics ahead of time for them to pick. It's actually given us a new way to develop different user interfaces for future visitors. It's been a bit of a challenge to get users to do remote data reduction and have them understand the process, but we have this new data reduction software in Matlab that postdoc Kurt Sundell has developed, And it's made it a lot easier to kind of visualize the different data that comes out of the mass spec. So for example, you can see the laser turning on, the downhole fractionation, the laser shutting off, and the washout time. And these visualizations are making it much easier to kind of get our users up to speed. We weren't exactly ready to go online and to move all of our data reduction online, but one of the plus sides of this has been that it's getting users familiar with our new data reduction interface. And the new data reduction interface comes with a lot of plotting tools and analysis tools, which users are really excited about, and it's helping them reduce their data much quicker and understand it a lot better.
We have our visitor on Zoom right now, and so we try to have Zoom sessions scheduled in the lab. We set up a meeting, and then we give our researcher a tour of the lab, let them know what part they're interacting with and what they're running, and so they're actually using TeamViewer to run the laser. And then we're here checking behind and making sure all of that is correct, and then actually running the mass spec itself. And then our viewer is here on the iPad actually watching what's going on. So right now they're watching cleaning shots. When the run is actually going, they can watch the mass spec and make sure that there are no trips or any issues that we need to know about. And this is constantly evolving with this kind of chaotic time. So who knows what this will be like next week, constantly changing.
So that kind of shows you how the lab has operated through the summer. Our world began to change again in August. The number of cases of COVID in Arizona began to grow up dramatically. The state of Arizona opened up for businesses and school systems to open their doors again. The university encouraged students to come back to campus and begin to take some of their classes in person. And they also encouraged labs to begin, maybe not normal operation, but operating in a fashion that was consistent with the safety protocols required during this COVID time. We realized in August when this was happening that the chance of one of our lab people being exposed to COVID was going up. And so we decided to put into place some additional safety protocols. For example, the lab coats. We now have lab coats that everybody wears when they're in the lab. They change their lab coats at the end of each day, come in the morning, put on a new clean lab coat. They get sanitized between each use. We also have shoes that lab people wear when they're in the lab, when they're moving around the hallways between labs. And again, those labs are cleaned thoroughly between each day of use. We've also put together a form on our webpage, and we ask all researchers and students, anybody who's interested in coming to the lab, to complete this survey. And as you can see, it asks questions about people being willing to adhere to the policies that we have in place. For example, thorough wipe down of all the labs, masks in place, lab coats. We encourage everyone to take advantage of the University of Arizona program called Wildcat Well Check, where you check in every morning with your body temperature, any symptoms that you might have, any contact that you might have had with someone who's been exposed to COVID. And so it's just our way of kind of keeping track of everybody's activities on each day. We encourage all of our lab people to take their temperature every morning and record that. We have a calendar for that. We also have encouraged people to test frequently. Here in Arizona now we can do tests on a weekly basis through the university, and we encourage people to do frequent testing. Now it's November. So far we have not had any cases of COVID that we know of in our lab. We are now having frequent visitors come through, maybe one group per week, consisting of 3 or 4 or 5 people, and they might be here for part of the week or all of the week. We're trying to maintain many of the safety protocols we had in place before, only one person per lab. And this has been challenging, as you've seen with the previous segments using Zoom and TeamViewer. We're still trying to have most of our interactions in a remote fashion, a virtual fashion. We also do have group gatherings where we can sit outside with appropriate distancing and try to interact in a sort of face-to-face communication in ways that are safe. So we're beginning to move toward a little bit more in-person interaction. One of the exciting things for us is to continue to develop the remote or virtual interactions that we have been working on for the last half year or so, and we're finding that we're getting much better at doing those. They're quite efficient. We know now how to offer a virtual session to a researcher who's never been to the lab, And after just a few hours of interaction with them, they're actually able to operate the instruments with TeamViewer. They're able to monitor data quality coming off the mass spectrometer. They can participate in data reduction. They can actually do data reduction all the way through themselves. And so we're feeling pretty good about our level of remote interaction with visitors. Of course, we're hoping that we will eventually move to a mode where people can come to the lab whenever they wish. That would be our hope. We're also having interesting interactions with the manufacturers of the lasers and the mass spectrometers that we have in our lab here. They're quite interested in exploring with us ways that we could design new hardware and new software, anticipating that we'll live in the future in a world where there might be less travel, there might be fewer occasions to sit next to somebody operating the instrument, more opportunities for interacting two people on instruments but sitting in different rooms or different universities or even different parts of the world. And so we're seeing kind of exciting opportunities to try to figure out how to operate in this world that we're moving into. So that's the status as of November 2020. We're hopeful that we'll be able to return back to normal operation, but in the meantime, I think we're able to provide a pretty reasonable experience for researchers in terms of training, education, generating data, involving students in outreach activities. And so I think we're encouraged about how we're going to be operating through the rest of this year. Please let us know if you have any questions about how we're operating, if you have any suggestions for how we operate. All of our contact information is on our web page, and please feel free to reach out to us and let us know how we can help you. Thank you.